Hi, I'm Melanie. My father called me retarded in front of the entire board, and then threw me out of the only life I'd ever known, over one mistake. But what if it wasn't a mistake? What if the people I loved most planned every piece of my downfall, slowly, quietly, for years? They rewrote my contract, forged my resignation, locked me out of my own home. I found out about the meeting from a calendar update I wasn't supposed to see. It was buried under another invite. Strategy Sync, 9 a.m. I blinked. That was my project. I clicked it open. Ronan had scheduled it with legal, ops, and the executive team. My name was missing. I marched down the hall to ask Dana, my assistant. She avoided my eyes, pretending to type. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. The meeting this morning, why wasn't I looped in? Dana hesitated. I thought you knew. Knew what? She looked down. Ronan said, he told me you wouldn't be needed. My stomach dropped. It's my project. I know. I didn't think it was my place to question him. She wasn't lying. Not entirely. But she wasn't telling the truth either. The first cut didn't bleed. It just left this strange hollow behind my ribs. That night, I barely slept. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd ask my dad what the hell was going on. I told myself there had to be some misunderstanding, some calendar glitch maybe. I even thought about calling Ronan, but I couldn't stomach hearing that smug, syrupy voice say something like, "Let's not get emotional here, sis." I walked into the boardroom at 8:55 the next morning. The usual suspects were already there. Legal, ops, my dad, at the head of the table in his custom navy suit. Ronan sat near him, smirking like he'd already won something. They all went quiet when I entered. "Morning," I said, trying not to sound like I wanted to throw up. My dad didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed a stack of papers from in front of him and slammed it onto the table. "Did you write this?" I blinked. "What is that?" He shoved it closer. "You tell me." I recognized the format. It was a draft contract for my project. I'd submitted a version last week, but this looked off. I flipped through quickly. Figures were wrong. Sections were rearranged. "I never sent this," I said quietly. "You signed it." Number I submitted a draft through the internal portal. "This isn't mine." "You submitted it," he snapped. "It went to legal. It almost went to the damn client. If Ronan hadn't caught it, we'd be giving away half the shipping division for pennies." "That's not possible." I double-checked the valuation models. "You didn't check anything." His voice was rising. "You rushed it. You didn't even ask legal to review before sending it out." "That's not true." "Then explain this." He jabbed the page with his finger. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I couldn't explain something I didn't do. And then it happened. His voice dropped low, not quiet, but sharp, like a punch between the ribs. "You're retarded, Melanie." Silence. Nobody moved. Even the hum of the ceiling lights felt louder than the room. My skin burned. My ears rang. My breath caught in my throat. Ronan looked down, barely containing a smirk. My mother, sitting at the far end, didn't even flinch. She just picked up her coffee and took a sip. I stood there like a statue, wishing I could rewind time or disappear. But I wasn't a kid anymore. There was no hiding behind school or excuses. I had made it here, to this table, to this company, and now my own father had humiliated me in front of the board. No one spoke up, not one person. He leaned back, folded his arms, and said nothing more. I gathered the papers, slowly, carefully, so they wouldn't see my hands shaking. I nodded like I understood. Then I turned and walked out. I don't remember the elevator ride. I just remember the silence. And then he said it, loud enough to echo in my bones. "You're retarded." I didn't cry in the elevator, not even when the doors shut and I was finally alone. But my throat felt raw, like I'd swallowed something too sharp to name. I drove straight home, hands clenched tight on the wheel. The office building faded behind me in the rearview mirror, but his words didn't. "You're retarded." I replayed it. Again and again, like some broken loop I couldn't escape. He'd said it like it wasn't the first time he'd thought it, just the first time he let it slip. Lake Forest looked exactly as it always had. Too perfect, too quiet, too fake. The sun was already sinking behind the rows of manicured trees as I pulled up to the gate. I typed in the code. Nothing happened. I tried again, still locked. My phone buzzed. A message from the household system. Access suspended. Contact admin. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I saw him, Gregory, my father's assistant, standing by the front steps, holding an envelope. He didn't wave, just stood there, waiting, like this was any other delivery. I stepped out of the car slowly, leaving my bag behind. "What's this?" I asked, even though I already knew. He didn't answer, just handed me the envelope and stepped back. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet, formal letterhead, stiff tone. 6-month severance package, immediate offboarding, one-way ticket to Portland. Departure, 8:05 a.m. Portland? I'd never even been. "What the hell is this?" My voice came out hoarse. Footsteps behind me. My mother. She looked composed. Red lipstick, silk blouse, not a single hair out of place. Just like always. "We thought it would be best to give you some space," she said softly. "Space?" "You're kicking me out of my own home." My voice cracked. "You'll have a chance to reset," she said, like we were discussing yoga retreats. "It's not forever." I laughed. A short, bitter thing that didn't sound like me. "You know he called me retarded in front of the entire board today, right?" She blinked, lips parting slightly. But she didn't look shocked. She looked tired. "He's under a lot of pressure." I took a step back. "So that makes it okay?" "Melanie, don't make this harder than it already is." "No," I said. "You already did that for me." I turned to leave, then stopped short. There, parked just beyond the hedge line, was Ronan's car. Engine running, windows up, in the passenger seat, my mother's handbag. I stared, confused for a moment. Then the passenger window rolled down. My mother walked toward the car, silent, slid into the seat. Ronan said something I couldn't hear, and she smiled. That was when it hit me. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a last-minute fallout from Dad losing it. This was planned. I don't remember getting back to my car, just the sick, hot flush crawling up my spine as I turned the key. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay. By the time I got back to the city, it was dark. I booked a room at a mid-range hotel, the kind with floral bedspreads and plastic-wrapped cups. The clerk didn't ask questions, and I was too tired to offer any. I sat on the bed, opened the envelope again. Folded behind the flight itinerary was another paper I hadn't seen before. My resignation letter. Typed. Signed. Stamped. Except I hadn't written it. And the signature? It wasn't mine. I stared at the letter in my hands for a long time. Longer than I'd like to admit. The fake resignation sat there in black ink and crisp formatting, as if it had waited patiently for me to find it. Everything about it felt wrong. The font wasn't my usual choice. The spacing was off, just slightly, but I would have noticed. And the signature. It looked like mine, but not how I signed under pressure. It was too clean, too smooth. It was the kind of signature someone would copy and paste, not write. That was the moment something inside me stopped breaking and started shifting. I wasn't just being punished. I was being erased. The room around me was too quiet. I could hear every creak in the ceiling, the low hum of the fridge in the hallway, even the distant buzz of traffic outside the hotel's foggy window. I set the papers down on the bedspread and sat back, trying to breathe evenly. Something about all of this didn't sit right, and hadn't for days. I grabbed my laptop and opened it, letting the familiar sound of the startup chime ground me. Then I logged into my secure drive, the one I kept off the company grid, where I backed up everything I worked on that mattered. But before I searched for anything, I paused, remembering something else. Last week, A random Tuesday morning, around 10:15, I'd been working on financial projections for the shipping division when my system suddenly logged me out. Locked me out, actually. Every file vanished. My access badge stopped working too. I'd chalked it up to a software glitch. Ronan even laughed it off. "Must be one of those tech hiccups," he'd said, smiling like a wolf in a cashmere suit. "Just reboot. It's probably just cleaning the pipes." Cleaning the pipes. He made everything sound like a joke, like I was overreacting for expecting basic functionality. Later that same day, I was removed from the main project Slack channel. A day after that, I wasn't on the invite list for the final presentation rehearsal. When I asked about it, HR said they had no visibility into departmental shifts. At the time, I had tried to convince myself I was just slipping through the cracks of a fast-moving system. Now, it was obvious. The cracks were created for me to fall through. I leaned forward, clicked open my files, and found my last version of the contract, the one I had finalized and saved the day before the legal review. Line by line, I scanned through it. My formatting, my numbers, my legal clauses. And then I opened the PDF my father had waved at me in the boardroom. The differences weren't glaring, but they were there. Clause 4.2, deleted. Line item values, cut in half. Language, altered, restructured, diluted. Someone had tampered with my document, not just edited it, sabotaged it. I needed answers, and I only knew one person who might have them. Dana, my assistant, the only one who had direct access to my inbox, calendar, and files. The one who used to bring me coffee without asking, and finish my sentences when I forgot where I was going mid-thought. I grabbed my phone and dialed. Voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text. Nothing. Then I opened her Instagram. Last active, 3 hours ago. I messaged her. It didn't go through. Blocked. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned me. They got to her, too. I felt the rage rising. Not the explosive kind, but the kind that burned low and steady in my chest. I wasn't just being removed. I was being framed. Cleanly, quietly, strategically. I walked to the small desk by the window, opened my laptop again, and clicked open my encrypted archive. One I hadn't touched since grad school. Back then, I'd created a habit. Every file I ever worked on, I kept a mirror copy. Timestamps, original file paths, proof. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I knew where to start. And if they wanted me gone, they should have done a better job deleting the original me. I hadn't planned to stay up all night, but sleep never came, and by the time the first streak of gray cut through the city skyline, my laptop was surrounded by a maze of open windows, contracts, time logs, backup folders, message threads. 2 versions of the contract sat side by side on my screen. My version, meticulous, clean, properly formatted. Every clause aligned, every valuation triple-checked. I'd poured 3 weeks of my life into that draft. The other version, the one shown to the board, was a mess in disguise. A butchered copy, clauses sliced away like fat. Key figures halved. Even the language felt wrong, like someone had run my words through a blender and smoothed it out just enough to pass a glance. But not my eyes. I knew my work, and this was someone else's hand pretending to be mine. There was no room for doubt now. I wasn't sloppy. I was set up. The adrenaline that had carried me through the night was fading, replaced by the cold throb of fatigue. But before I let my body crash, I needed to know one more thing. The email. The one that supposedly sent the contract to legal. I dug through my archive and found no record of that email ever leaving my inbox. I was obsessive about logging correspondence, especially with legal. But there was nothing. I remembered Ronan making a snide comment in the kitchen one day. Paper trails are only useful when you control the paper. I'd laughed at the time. Now it made my stomach turn. I checked my smartwatch, an old habit I never broke, even when I hated the look of it. I pulled up my location history. At the exact time the email was supposedly sent from my work account, I was 2 miles across town at a supplier meeting. My GPS showed me at the corner of Randolph and Clinton, timestamped and geotagged. I cross-referenced it with the email metadata the board had reviewed. According to the internal report, the email came from my company device, at my desk, logged in under my name. Except I wasn't there. My smartwatch proved it. But when I tried to retrieve my company system logs, they were gone, wiped, clean, as if I'd never been there at all. Somebody had scrubbed the timeline, erased my alibi, and the only way they could do that was with access I no longer had. I sat still for a few seconds, letting the weight of it settle into my bones. Whoever did this didn't just want me out. They wanted to make sure no one remembered I was ever in. I stood up, stretched my stiff legs, and poured myself a glass of water from the courtesy pitcher on the dresser. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I wasn't confused. I wasn't scared. I was done hoping this would fix itself. I walked back to the desk, sat down, and opened a blank message draft. To Ronan Varel at varelglobal.com. Subject: Curious. Do you remember what you said about paper trails? I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I deleted the message. He didn't deserve a warning. Instead, I opened a folder titled Red Flag Legal Backup and began copying files onto a private drive. I encrypted everything with a new passcode, one I'd never used at work. Halfway through the upload, my phone buzzed. Blocked number, one new message. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. Don't trust anyone, not even her. My spine stiffened. There was no name, just a single character at the bottom of the message. E. I stared at the message for a full minute before locking my phone and sliding it under the pillow. My heart wasn't racing anymore, just beating steadily, like it had made a decision long before I caught up to it. By the next morning, I was on a train headed east. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. Boston felt like the right kind of place to disappear. Familiar enough from school days, distant enough from my family's reach. I rented a desk in a shared office downtown, something anonymous with frosted glass doors and quiet people who didn't ask questions. I set up my laptop, opened my folders, and forced myself to start from the beginning. To move forward, I had to go back, to the moment it all collapsed. It was the morning of the final presentation. I'd been up since 4 a.m., rehearsing numbers in my head, checking last-minute adjustments. My laptop, solid as ever, suddenly froze. Completely unresponsive. I remember tapping the screen like an idiot, willing it to reboot. Nothing. Bad timing, huh? Ronan's voice had drifted in from the hallway, too casual. He walked in, holding a printed stack of papers. Don't worry, I've got a copy right here. You emailed it to me last night, remember? Except I hadn't. But in the chaos of the moment, of the room filling with board members, my dad barking about punctuality, my anxiety fogging everything, I took the papers. I was too proud, too scared to admit I wasn't ready. I flipped to the executive summary and felt my gut twist. The language was off. Some of the metrics looked deflated. But I told myself it was nerves, that I was being paranoid. I used that version. The version Ronan handed me. The same one that got me fired. Now, 1 week later, sitting under sterile white lights and the hum of someone else's coffee machine, I reopened the file chain. I compared the document I'd saved on my external drive to the printed version from that morning. The file Ronan gave me? It wasn't just altered. It had been created 2 hours after I'd submitted my final. The metadata was clear. Time-stamped edits, file name variants, no digital signature. My version had every checkpoint logged. His had none. I opened the print version and held it beside mine. Paragraphs reordered. Clause 5.6 entirely missing. Fonts inconsistent. Margins off. Sloppy work, if you were looking. And that was the point. No one had been meant to look. They expected me to fall apart quietly. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, teeth clenched, rereading every line with a stillness that felt surgical. They forged my mistake. And they handed it to me like a loaded gun, knowing I'd fire it into my own foot. But they forgot one thing. I keep records. I composed an email to the legal team. 2 sentences. No accusations. Just questions. Can you confirm who authorized the revised contract draft presented at the March 2nd meeting? I'd like to verify the final formatting source. I hit send. Then I waited. 20 hours later, my phone rang. Mel? Ronan's voice. Too smooth, too fast. Hey, I got a ping from legal. They said you were asking questions. Just wanted to check in, you know? I didn't respond. Look, I know things got out of hand, and maybe Dad was a little harsh. But you've got to understand, there was pressure. It wasn't personal. Still silent. You okay? That's when I spoke. You really shouldn't have. And I hung up. It had been 4 weeks since I left Chicago behind. 4 weeks since I slammed the door on that call with Ronan. I thought the anger would dull with time. It didn't. Instead, it turned into something sharper, something useful. Boston gave me space. I rented a small unit above a wine bar in the North End. Cozy enough to work from, anonymous enough to feel safe. My days were quiet, predictable. Research in the morning, encrypted calls with potential partners in the afternoon, cold meals at night. But it was the mailbox downstairs that changed everything. One afternoon, after a long call with a maritime logistics contact in Singapore, I found a cream-colored envelope wedged between credit card offers and pizza coupons. My name was written in familiar, blocky handwriting I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Inside was a single page. No signature, no return address, just a message in Ephraim's hand. They've underestimated the one I taught best. Do not trust email. They're watching everything. Use what I gave you. For a moment, I just sat on the stairwell, letter in hand, fingers trembling slightly. I hadn't heard from my grandfather since the day I was escorted out of the boardroom. Everyone thought he was too old, too tired to care anymore. They didn't know him. He never stopped watching. And clearly, he hadn't stopped protecting me either. The next morning, I registered a company under a name I'd scribbled in the margins of my grad school notebooks years ago. Phoenix Navigation Solutions. A rebirth. A rise. Quiet, unassuming, but sharp where it counted. I hired 3 people. None of them from Chicago. No resumes that could be traced back to Varel. Just scrappy, brilliant, hungry minds who liked puzzles and hated bureaucracy. We set up shop in a co-working loft with brick walls and terrible coffee. But it was ours. We worked quietly, with no press, no LinkedIn posts, just data, trade flows, port traffic, licensing renewals, and one clause, 23.4b, printed and pinned above my desk. In the event of restructuring or asset transfer, the original signatory shall maintain first right of refusal for all Pacific Rim shipping routes and associated infrastructure. Buried in corporate legalese, nearly invisible, but not to me. A week after Phoenix launched, I received another letter from Ephraim. No greeting, no pleasantries. Watch the Singapore deal. They're overstating asset value. The real leverage is in the port access. Jakarta and Cebu are next. You know what to do. I didn't need translation. It was a game of dominoes, and I was watching them line up. Every few days, more letters came. No digital trail, no proof he existed in this plan. Just paper, ink, and intent. Trust no one, he wrote once, especially the ones who smile too easily. I thought of my mother, her calm voice handing me a plane ticket out of the house, the way she sat in Ronan's passenger seat that night. Not confused, not conflicted, comfortable. They'd all made their choice. Now I was making mine. Each note from Ephraim was another breadcrumb. Each one pulled back the curtain a little more. I stopped thinking like a victim. I started thinking like an architect. On a Thursday night, the office was empty. My team had gone home. I was alone with the hum of the city outside and the soft tap of a highlighter against my desk. I took the original board contract, the one they claimed I'd ruined, and pinned it next to mine. Then I pulled out the clause, 23.4b, circled it in red, underlined it, and whispered aloud just once. Your mistake was thinking I wouldn't come back. 10 years passed. Not slowly, not gently, but with enough distance for me to sharpen the edges they once tried to file down. The morning I returned to Chicago, the city skyline didn't feel the same. I wasn't here for nostalgia. I wasn't here for closure. I came to finish what they started. The law office sat on the 33rd floor, overlooking the river, sleek, polished, impersonal, like most of the men who used to sign my paychecks. I walked into the lobby of Caldwell & Associates in a charcoal suit, heels clicking across marble. My reflection in the glass doors didn't flinch. When the elevator opened onto the conference floor, I stepped out to silence. They were all there. Ronan at the head of the table, like a prince in exile, my parents on either side. My father stone-faced, my mother dabbing at invisible tears. 3 board members sat along the wall, shifting uncomfortably. No one spoke. Until I did. "Shall we begin?" The attorney, Mr. Caldwell, cleared his throat. "Yes." Thomas Ephraim Varel left specific instructions for how this session would proceed. Ronan scoffed. "He also left a company in financial crisis. I hope this isn't going to be some dramatic stunt." I sat down across from him, unbothered. Mr. Caldwell opened the envelope. "To my granddaughter, Melanie Varel, I leave all controlling interest in Varel Global, including but not limited to voting rights, majority shareholding, and full operational authority." The air left the room. Ronan laughed once, short, bitter. "That's not possible. The shares were supposed to transfer to me. The board approved it." Mr. Caldwell didn't blink. "The board was not informed of the full terms of Ephraim's private trust. Those terms override all internal policies." My father leaned forward. "This isn't legal." Mr. Caldwell pulled out another folder. "What's illegal is document tampering, vote rigging, and falsified termination records." He slid the folder across the table. "Included here are original contracts, employee emails, internal edits, and a forensic audit, proving that Melanie was removed under false pretenses." I reached into my briefcase and placed my version of the shipping contract on the table. Clause 23.4b, highlighted in yellow. "Here's the original document, with timestamp, with my digital signature, the one you erased." I glanced toward Ronan. "And here's the one you printed for me when my laptop just happened to crash." He said nothing. Mr. Caldwell continued, his voice even. "The clause she included grants her first right of refusal on all Pacific Rim routes, which, given the upcoming restructuring and licensing deals in Singapore, Jakarta, and Cebu, means she controls the most valuable segment of Varel Global's operations." The board erupted into hushed arguments. My mother whispered something to my father. His jaw tightened. Ronan just stared. I stood up. "You all know what this means. Without my consent, the restructuring fails. Without the restructuring, you default on 3 major loans. Without those loans, well, I assume your investors are already asking questions." I turned to the board. "I won't stop the restructure. I'll lead it, but not with the people who tried to bury me." Silence. My mother reached for me. "Melanie, this isn't necessary." I cut her off without raising my voice. "I'm not here for revenge, Mother. I'm here for correction." She blinked, swallowed, and said nothing more. I picked up my folder, slipped it back into my briefcase, and turned to Ronan. "You have until 5 p.m. to clear your office. I'm moving in tomorrow." He didn't speak, not a word, just stared at me like I was someone he'd never met. 1 week later, I walked back into the building they once dragged me out of. But this time, I wasn't flanked by silence and shame. This time, I moved with intent. The lobby of Varel Global was buzzing. Not loud, not chaotic, just filled with the kind of uneasy static that fills the air when something big is about to happen, and everyone feels it, but no one says it. I didn't need an announcement. People looked up. Phones were lowered mid-scroll. Conversations paused mid-sentence. And then someone whispered, not even trying to be discreet, "That's her." The receptionist stood as I approached. "Welcome back, Ms. Varel." I didn't smile. just nodded once and stepped into the elevator. Alone. 32 floors, and not a single regret. The elevator chimed open to the executive suite. Familiar corridor, same sterile walls. But this time, the air didn't push against me, it made way. Ronan's door was already open. He was inside, sleeves rolled up, shoving papers into a box. His usually slick hair was out of place, shirt wrinkled, confidence cracked. He didn't look at me right away, just said, "Guess you're early." "I always was." He glanced up, gave me a half smile, like we were back in the break room years ago, and this was all just a misunderstanding. "Look, Melanie." "No," I stepped in. "You don't get to lead with charm. You don't get to act like you didn't watch me drown and hand me the anchor." His jaw tensed. "I made mistakes, all right? I didn't think it would go that far, Dad." "Don't blame Dad," I cut in. "You didn't just fire me. You erased me from files, from meetings, from my own family, and you smiled while doing it." He exhaled through his nose slowly. "I was scared of losing everything." "And now you have." I slid the envelope across his desk. "Board endorsed. Legal's already signed off. You're out of operations for 5 years. No advisory role, no assets, non-compete locked in." "You're freezing me out." "I'm giving you what you gave me, but I'm doing it legally." He swallowed, eyes flickering to the papers. "You win then." I shook my head. "This isn't a game anymore. It never should have been." He didn't argue. He just nodded once, tight and bitter, and went back to packing. I left the office without looking back, but I didn't get far. My parents were waiting in the executive lounge. My mother stood first. "Melanie, please." She looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, not from age, from truth. "I didn't know everything. I thought they were protecting the company." "You were in the car," I said flatly, "with Ronan the night I was thrown out." She blinked. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." My father cleared his throat. "Mel, you've made your point, but let's be smart about this. The company needs unity. We can talk." I stepped closer. "You chose him. You chose loyalty to a version of the company that died the day you told me I wasn't good enough." He looked away. Couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm not here to fight anymore," I continued, "but I won't pretend we're okay. Not now. Maybe not ever." I walked past them and opened the door to what used to be my grandfather's office. Now it was mine. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I placed one thing on the desk before sitting down. The framed original contract, the one they tried to use to break me, and all I could think was, they built this throne from fire and lies, but I'm the one who rose from the ashes. 3 weeks had passed since I walked into this office with the weight of 10 years trailing behind me. Now, I sat at the same desk my grandfather once ruled from, not as an heir, because heirs wait, but as a builder, a restorer, a woman who came back not for blood, but for balance. The quarterly reports were stacked neatly beside my coffee mug. Numbers were steady. Staff morale was up. Rumors had quieted. The board had fallen into line faster than I expected, part fear, part relief. No one asked about Ronan anymore. Phoenix Navigation had merged into Varel's logistics division without friction. My team, my people, were now at the core of every strategic discussion, bringing insight no spreadsheet could fake. I didn't need applause. I needed stability, and I had it. I stood up from the desk and walked to the window. The skyline stretched like it always had, glass and steel reflecting a world that never stopped spinning. I had changed, but the city hadn't. And maybe that was okay. Every Friday, without fail, a bouquet of white lilies arrived at reception. No note, but I knew the handwriting on the delivery slip, my mother. I never replied. Last week, my father requested a meeting through my assistant. I didn't take it. Then there was Ronan. He'd sent one email, subject line, "I'm sorry, I didn't open it. I didn't need to." Closure doesn't always come with conversations. Sometimes it's just silence that holds. I wasn't cruel, I just understood, finally, what they never had. Blood means nothing without truth. Family is not made of last names, it's made of choices. Mine had spoken loudly for years. And now, so had I. I turned back to my desk and reached for a small velvet envelope I had locked in the bottom drawer. It was the last letter from Ephraim, dated 1 month before his death. It had been marked to be delivered only after the will was read. I unfolded the paper, hands steady. Melanie, queens don't wait for crowns, they build their own. And they do it not to be seen, but to lead. You were never a pawn, never a mistake, just a threat they underestimated. Don't become what they feared, become what they needed. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and returned it to the drawer. Then I stood, walked to the door, and took one last look at the framed contract on the wall, the same one they tried to use to break me. It didn't symbolize revenge anymore. It represented survival and evolution. I stepped into the boardroom, where the next meeting was about to begin. No heads turned in surprise this time, no sideways glances, just acknowledgement, and something more powerful than any title: respect. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with understanding who you are, no matter who refused to see it. I used to believe loyalty was owed, especially to those we call family. But I learned the hard way. Loyalty that costs you your identity isn't love, it's control. Being underestimated hurt. Being betrayed by blood, that shattered me. But here's the truth. Sometimes the people who break you are also the reason you rebuild stronger. This isn't just a story about revenge or business. It's about knowing your worth even when no one else does. It's about fighting for the truth even when it costs you everything. And above all, it's about choosing who you become, no matter who tried to define you. So maybe now it's your turn to ask yourself, have you ever been told you weren't enough by your own family? Have you ever walked away from something toxic to build something better? If so, you're not alone. And I'd love to hear your voice. Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something inside you. Tell me where you're watching from. Let's connect. If this video didn't hit you the same way, tell me why. I welcome every perspective. And hey, if you're still watching, take a second to subscribe. This channel shares stories that challenge, inspire, and remind you that even when life burns everything down, you can rise again, smarter, stronger, and on your own terms. See you in the next story.